Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for our talk on enlisting recruiters in the job search and whether or not that makes sense. If so, when and what types should you look for? Where can you find them? All of those fun kinds of topics that fall within this. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jody Hammer, and I'm the Career Services Specialist for NPCA's Global Reentry Program. So I'm happy to be here with you today. Please do use the chat box to put any of your questions into so that I can see them, and I will definitely do my best to answer any and all of them possible. So we're going to be talking, as I said, about using recruiters in your job search. Sometimes it might make sense, and yet there's a lot of tips and advice for which types you might want to use depending on your situation, and then being careful as to cost and whether or not it's going to cost you or the employer. And so I've tried to put together a short slide presentation here on some of those aspects, and then as always I'll be following up with the resources, additional resources for you to use in your own, where you can review some of the articles and some good resources for learning more about this topic. So let's go ahead and start. Before we get into what many people would, think of when they think of recruiters, like headhunters and, recruitment agencies and all of that, I want to talk a little bit about temporary agencies and temporary recruiters who can be a really valuable resource for RPCVs, right? When you get back, I've worked with many different agencies here in the DC metro area. And in fact, when I was at Peace Corps running the Career Center there during my tenure there, I would bring in, staffing representatives who would do like resume workshops and such. My goal was to connect them to that. They would do those kinds of workshops, and then they would do one-on-one like reviews with the RPCVs and meet with them. And if they were interested in temp work, they could talk a little bit about what kind of work they'd be interested in, that kind of thing. But there was no pressure. They could certainly just get a resume review as well. Some of the advantages of temporary agencies or considering temporary employment while you're doing a job search is, it can actually, fill some of those employment gaps, right? So I know many of you have come back and it's been a tough economy. It's been, COVID, and that's been really complicating to your job search. And so you may still be looking. And one of the ways, if you do decide to do a little temp work, and, much of it's probably now, more, online, but doing some of that kind of work can help put something more recent on your resume, right? Where instead of seeing March 2020, which now is what, 9 months, 8 months ago, it's been some time, but understandable. And so don't worry if you have that gap. People will understand, especially that gap with this time frame, knowing that you were evacuated from your Peace Corps service, came back to COVID reality here where you were pretty much forced to stay at home, that kind of thing. So, but you can certainly explore that as a way now, even, right, while you're doing your job search and looking for that next best fit. You can get some experience, right, or just some extra income. Honestly, a lot of times people think of temporary employment as, oh well, that's just admin, it's all admin. And while there definitely are a lot of administrative roles that are recruited for through temporary agencies, it by no means is, and like it's not limited to that. There are lots of different kinds of opportunities, right? They're also temporary, but many times when you get your foot in the door or you start to work with an agency and they're impressed by you, right? They're putting you with an employer, and that employer might say, wow, this person's great. We're going to fill this job eventually. I want them to apply. Then you have the bonus of having done the job, or whatever. And it may, as I was saying, it may not be the job, the end all be all job that you want, but it can also be an entry point to get your foot in the door. And then you really wow them with your all of your skills and all of that, where you can easily move around to different jobs as well. So there's lots of different ways to look at a temporary agency and doing temp work, right? It can also, it can help you, like I was saying, not only get your foot in the door, but even, kind of transition into maybe an industry that you're looking to get into, right? Or even if it's not in an industry that's at all related to what you're looking to do, those transferable skills. And especially, when you're talking about, administrative or program management or things like that, these are temporary roles they have. Maybe it's a temporary role to organize a conference. That's awesome experience, right? Because it uses a lot of the skills that a lot of employers want, right? Managing, multitasking, managing lots of different, clients or stakeholders, and, communication skills and all of that, right? Teamwork. You're oftentimes working with lots of different, teams. So you can get some really good skills to add to your resume as well. So I definitely encourage you to consider that. The other thing that's a real advantage is typically with temporary agencies. I can't think of a temporary agency where you pay anything. Like, it's free to the job seeker, right? They are paid by the clients that they end up putting the people, the job candidate into, right? Typically they're paid by the client, right? So it's great. It's no risk and no money for you when you probably don't have a lot of extra discretionary income anyway. So that's another, huge advantage. It also allows you to tap into their many services and resources. And I can tell you, the temp agencies that we used to work with more, in bringing in and such, they would do not only resume reviews but mock interviews when you're like trying to get your job, and you're doing a job search. If they're putting you up as a candidate, they want you to excel, right? You are who they're putting up. So they want to make sure that you're going to do the best that you can. So they will oftentimes spend time, and they have resources to help you prepare. But your actual recruiter, will do oftentimes a temp, a mock interview with you to have you practice, right? So that can be really helpful. Even applying that to your other areas of work, right? That you're doing. Great, Katie. And Katie shares, my current job is through a staffing agency. And your job's in the tech industry. Great. That is awesome, Katie. I hope that's going well. Out of curiosity, where is that? Where are you located? There are staffing agencies all over. So it doesn't, it's not just Washington, D.C. or big cities. You'll have temp agencies in a lot of different areas. And you can oftentimes find information. It can be overwhelming. Like, well, how do I choose the best one? Do some research. Best temporary agencies, they're always rated, they're ranked, right? And so they'll come out with the best of, and sometimes best of for certain by industry, IT, as Katie shared, right? Other ones could be in, there are some that oftentimes are needed maybe even in like law, that area. Or many times it's your person that's calling out and doing a lot of the outreach and community outreach. So there's kind of sometimes different specialties that temporary agencies have. So you can certainly look that up as well, and compare it to what you're looking for. So please do consider that. Have any others of you done temp work ever in the past? I'm curious. You can just drop that in the chat box if you have. Um, it's great. Okay, and Katie, you're in Florida. Okay, and the position's remote. Yeah, almost everything's remote these days, isn't it? Yeah, things have definitely changed a lot. Yeah, good. Okay, that's great. I'm glad to hear that you're having a successful experience in that. Wonderful. So let's go on and talk a little more about recruitment agencies versus employment agencies. And a lot of times people will use these interchangeably, but they're actually technically different. Your recruiter, the client for the recruiter, is the employer, right? That's looking for a candidate. And so they turn to a recruiter to say, we need help filling this position or these positions or whatever. And so that recruiter, recruitment agency, right, they go out and seek out qualified candidates to put up for that position, right? So typically for those, you're found somehow, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you get found and how to get your resume out there, and how to get the word out there, and just your profile on social media and such, so that you can get found by these recruiters, right? For an employment agency, the client is actually the job seeker. So kind of like what I was saying with the temporary agency, that you're their client that they're putting up to that employer, and they seek out employers that have needs, and they say, hey, I'm whoever from whatever temp agency, and we have a proven experience in this area, and we'd love to help you out with your needs. And so they basically get, they convince the employer to use them, and they list their opportunities with that employment agency or whatever. But the client actually remains you the job seeker. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Another big difference between the two is who's your boss, right? So with the recruitment agency, remember, they're the ones the employer seeks out the recruiter, the recruitment agency, to help them fill a position, right? And so once you get hired, that employer that you get assigned to, that you get hired by, is your true employer, right? Whereas if you get a job through an employment agency, that employment agency is your boss. So whether it's a temp agency or some other type of employment agency, that agency is more your the person that you're going to be paid by, right? They get something from, obviously they have some kind of a contract or whatever, but you are working under their shell, if you will. And it sounds like, Katie, that's what you're in a sense, you're doing it's a temp employment agency, right? And so yours, you said, was the tech industry, which is very common, as I've put on this slide. Oftentimes, the like tech or IT kinds of jobs, you may be working for an employment agency, but assigned to different organizations. It could be that you have an assignment that's like a long-term or permanent, even whatever, permanent even, or a long-term contract anyway, or you could be doing more of temp types of things. So I hope that makes sense. Okay. And then who pays the bill? So some firms, right? Like what you want to some firm, the fees, right, are charged to the job seeker, but others are paid by the employer, right? However, your agency that you're reporting to, right? I would generally recommend that you avoid the agencies or recruiters that charge you, the job seeker, partly because I think there's enough out there that you can get one without having to pay for it. Like, I really feel strongly that the employer, should be the one that's footing the bill if they're looking for qualified candidates, and whatever, that makes sense. Now, there are some exceptions to this. Perhaps, there might be a very niche market where you need more of that agent, and you might need to pay for it. And what comes to mind off the top of my head is more of like an agent if you are in theater, or somebody who's a television personality, or that seeking out that kind of work. Then you may have to pay. But in general, I would recommend that you at least start with those that don't charge you, the job seeker, because the other reason is you don't have a lot of extra money usually. I mean, most of the evacuees, you come back, you don't have maybe a lot of savings or money for that. So I'm all for trying to limit the amount of money that you ever have to put out. Same thing with like job uh, business cards. Try to find business cards that offer the free, where you only pay for the shipping. I'm always, I guess, thrifty. That's my my middle name too. I try to definitely save money for people and for clients and such. So that's another one. Okay. And then I want to talk a little bit about a headhunter, because a lot of people have a negative impression of headhunters. Like the term itself elicits oftentimes kind of like, ooh, headhunter. They're, just not, you just don't think of, oh, this is great, I want to use a headhunter. But they really are, and can be. I mean, I think the quality, of course, varies, right? They're more of, kind of independent agents that then, get, they find an employer who has a need, and they go out and they basically search for, it's search for the candidates to fill that. Oftentimes, headhunters are used more for your like higher level, or as this slide says, kind of an executive search, is what they oftentimes, so top executives, finding those for employers, right? But again, they have different specialties, different areas. So you can certainly, even do some basic searching on, headhunters in the fill in the blank industry, and see, what kinds might be out there, or whether or not they are used, and what kind would make most sense for you. So, but they can be very helpful, right? If they connect with you and they know what the need is of the employer or employers that they're looking for clients for, so they can then help you tweak kind of your resume, all of that to make sure that you will really shine for that role, right? Similar to what really temporary agencies do, but oftentimes at a little higher, level. So, so don't be overly shy to think about using them, right? So how do you connect with headhunters? How are you going to find these folks that are like actively seeking out, candidates, right? Where they're helping you do your job search. Like that's great, right? One way, I think initially you need to update your profile on LinkedIn and make it searchable. So when you're in an active job search, and you're not trying to hide that from your employer, that kind of thing, making your LinkedIn profile searchable can really help you. And if you don't know how to do that, just do a Google search. It's quite basic. How to make my LinkedIn profile searchable by employers, or whatever. And that way, recruiters and employers can actually connect with you. It's like that reverse of you doing all of the connection and trying to connect with other people and all of that. They can also do that, and reach out to you. And I'm curious as to if any of you from your LinkedIn profiles, have any of you been contacted by an agency or a headhunter or recruiter regarding any kind of jobs? If so, drop that in the chat box, and I'd love to hear. And you can even actually unmute. We have a small enough crew that you can certainly unmute and share if you prefer. Anyone? And that's okay if you prefer not to, but feel free to drop it in the chat box if you have had this. It definitely can happen. The other thing is you need to tap into your own network, right? So you need to you know put work into, like, put the word out that, hey, I'm thinking about possibly exploring the use of employment agencies or recruitment agencies, headhunters, whatever, for the job search. Do you have any recommendations, referrals, thoughts on this? People, in the industry that you're interested in particular, might have, really good insight for you on how to connect with others. And if they connect you to somebody, that's great, because then it's not like, you are referred by somebody else who's already connected to them, and that can really help as well. So those are a couple of the ways, right? Feel free to also write in the chat box if you can think of other ways to connect with headhunters as I go through the rest of the slide here. Certainly you can search through, like, recruiting directories. So much is online, right? To find recruiters. And when you're looking for a recruiter, it's not, you have the opportunity. You're kind of in the, I don't want to say the upper hand, but you're doing research on who you're going to possibly enlist to work with you on this. So it's kind of you choosing, right? As much as them choosing you and you being chosen, it's you finding someone that you're comfortable with, that you feel has, your best interest in mind, and you feel is a professional, right? So while you're doing that, and you're connecting with them, don't be afraid to ask them for references when you're kind of interviewing them and, chatting with them a little bit, to see if it might be the right fit. And that's perfectly fine. And they should be able and willing to give you some past clients who would be willing to, share information with you. Also, doing outreach, right, to, agencies, and, directly to the agencies. Not, I mean, when you are referred by somebody and you're, connecting with someone, asking them, like I said, for references, but asking them for, like, what are the other kinds of services they offer, like what other kinds of, what are you getting into, if you choose to work with them, what does that all involve? So having them, share with you whether or not they do free resume reviews or mock interviews before you go up for, a job, just getting more information from them. on what they have can be really helpful too. Okay. Let's see. Stu dropped something, thank you, into the chat box. And you said, I was contacted by a volunteer group who works with orphans in my country of service. Oh, how cool is that? That's great. That's a way to connect with your country of service even while you can't be there, maybe. That's really cool. So I imagine you had your profile searchable on LinkedIn then, so that they were able to actually find you, right? Awesome. Okay. So I want to ask now, I really want to stop and see what questions there are. And while you start putting those into the chat box, any questions that you do have, I want to cover one more thing. And that is, just because you choose to enlist a recruiter, recruitment agency, employment agency, whatever, what have you, right? Does not mean that you can just sit back and, oh, they're going to get me a job, right? You can't depend on them for that. They may connect you with a job that works out, but it doesn't mean that you can just rest on, your laurels, like, oh, I'm not, I'm just going to chill out then and wait, because it may or may not pan out and it may take time, and you want to, presuming you want to get a job as soon as possible, you need to be willing and able to actively engage in that. And that does mean doing a job search in the holidays, during the holidays. Certainly take off some time, recharge, meditate, all of that, right? And, ring in the new year or whatnot, but don't completely give up on the whole, the season of the holiday season for your job search. You want to still keep going in that. I actually did a webinar recently on that very subject, specifically, how you can and why you should still network and be doing the job search in the holiday season. So I think I'm going to be sharing an article, a really good article that I love, that's on who you should be writing, you should be sending holiday greetings to, specifically, like, if in terms of professional contacts, right? References, and and past employers, and just keeping that alive and connected, and keeping that's really important as well. Because that way, when you do have a job that wants a reference in the future, you can reach out to them, and you'll still be fairly recently connected, not, oh gosh, I haven't heard from you in 5 years, what are you doing now? So anyway, that's on a little bit of a side note, as I'm waiting for any questions to come in on the topic of enlisting recruiters and recruitment agencies, employment agencies, in the job search. So you are welcome to either put your comments, your questions, in the chat box, or you can certainly unmute yourself if you prefer. I'm happy to stay on after the recording ends as well, briefly. Andrew, thank you for the question. How frequently would you recommend following up with a recruiter, talent acquisition officer, when you don't hear back after reaching out without coming off as annoying? Okay, my question for you, Andrew, is, you said after the initial outreach. So is that your initial outreach that's like, hey, here's who I am, I'd love to talk to you, like just connecting with them? Or is that after you've had conversation? Yes. Okay. So it's in that case, when you've reached out to them and they haven't reconnected or connected with you, I think there's a lot you can do without being annoying, right? First, realizing that these, folks are probably extremely busy, right? Trying to, many times. And so even though it would be nice to get feedback and a response very, timely and all of that, it doesn't always happen. I would say, if you haven't heard back in maybe a week, or certainly in the second week, I would say it's perfectly fine to send a follow-up, maybe email, just to say, just following up on, my initial correspondence related to whatever. I'm excited to talk to you more about, opportunities, and, to perhaps potentially work with you, again, reattaching for your convenience, and then you could even forward the message that you sent. Because for them, part of the problem is, if you reach out a week later and it's just your email, and you say, hey, I'm, just reaching out to see if we can connect at some point to chat a little more, but you don't attach that, then they have to go search it out. Every second of their time is so, it can be just crazy. It's something that takes even not very long. It's like, okay, I got to do that later, I have to, and it just falls to the, to the side. So I think you would be perfectly fine to, forward your initial, and to say, just wanted to touch base, or just wanted to, regarding, the below email, would love the chance to visit with you at your convenience. I'm sure things are very busy at this time, or whatever, I look forward to hearing from you, and then have your phone number there as well under your signature line. That's what I would do in that case. Other questions? Either verbally, you can take yourself off on mute. I can see that right here, or you can dump it in.
Hey, Jody.
Yes.
Hi, this is Stuart.
Oh, great.
I had a question where I wanted to ask about specifically for myself personally. I'm still trying to figure out my career and the direction I want to take it in.
Sure.
I've got some general ideas, but I'm trying to lock down on specifically what I want to work on. When you're in that position where you don't have like a very clear career path, would you say it's still a good time to go to someone like a talent recruiter?
Yeah, I think depending on like what you're looking at now, it sounds like you're not sure what your, like career trajectory is going to look like, which is totally normal. And remember that most people change careers, not jobs, many, many times in their lives these days. So you kind of have these career pockets instead of your career, what your career was overall, and they're oftentimes very distinct. So don't worry necessarily that you don't have everything figured out, right? But I would say if you're looking at, you're probably focused on trying to think about what are the next best steps to move me in the direction of, what I might be thinking of, or at least the skills for an area that I'm thinking is of great interest, right? So, so how you would, I think, put that to a recruiter, right? Or a headhunter, or whatever, you probably would be looking less at a headhunter in that situation, because you're kind of trying to see what your career, you know what I mean? It's not, they're much more oftentimes like specific executive level, high level types of, opportunities. So, but you could certainly work with, whether it's an employment agency, temp agency, recruitment firm. What I would say is try to practice kind of your elevator pitch of how you bring that together, because what you don't want to do is come across as like, I really don't know what I want to do, I have no clue, so I'll, do anything. I mean, you don't really want that, because that can just make you maybe look desperate, or, and even if somebody doesn't, it sounds like you have maybe some ideas, but you're just trying to kind of, pull it together. Even if you didn't have any idea, I wouldn't say that. I would probably be like, I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking of an example, for example, to say, I'm really looking to utilize my program management and monitoring and evaluation skills in an environment where I can contribute to a nonprofit, or, I'm flexible to the sector, but contribute to an organization's mission. Whatever, like something like that, where you can just kind of tout a little bit of your, general transferable skills that you're looking to really apply in an area, that has a mission you're passionate about, or in an area that, speaks to your values and mission, something like that. So that, so that they get some of the, skills that you have too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. That is helpful. Gives me a little guidance, because just I wasn't sure, if I go to a recruiter without a clear idea of what I want to do, are they going to be able to help me?
Right.
But yeah, I'll keep that in mind.
I think they can, to answer that question. I think they can help you. It's and it comes down to, how do you help them oftentimes as well, right? Which is where I talk about the packaging of it, how you package it, because they're looking for the best candidates to fill whatever vacancies. So when you're talking to them and you're learning more about the types, you can certainly say, can you tell me what your general clientele is, or what kinds of skills they're really looking for? And when they come back with those kinds of skills, um, you can say, wow, well, that's really great to hear, because one of, I think, my biggest skills honed in my Peace Corps service was my ability to da, 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 and whatever. Like, you can kind of bring out some of your skills as well, after they've shared with you what they're looking for, if that makes sense. And that makes you more attractive, like, oh, this is somebody that has a skill set, okay, in this area. So, any other questions that have come in? Let's see here. I don't see any more. Um, if there are, again, you can certainly take yourself off of mute, or you can just jump it in the chat box. I'm fine either way. All right. In waiting the 7 seconds, we are instructed to wait for people to come out and share. I think what we'll do now is I'll go ahead and turn off the recording, and I have a few minutes to stay on the line. If anyone does want to ask maybe a one-on-one question, please feel free to do that. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to future events. Please do drop in ideas for future webinars and podcasts into the chat box too, either here or email me ASAP. I'm finalizing January by early next week. So thanks so much. Take care and have a great day. Happy holidays.